It's that time again, folks. It's time for the original Dragon Talk Radio. I'm your host, John Clement. Are you ready? Let's do this thing. Welcome back to the original Dragon Talk Radio. Yesterday we talked about the Game Shop's Basement, which is live gaming, professional GM quality, I guarantee that myself, that is looking for players. So at GameShopsBasement.com, link below, you can find a schedule of games. And tonight, this would be Thursday, May 9th, 2024. Tonight's game is Dungeons & Dragons OSR Edition, the Hollow World campaign. So exploring the Hollow World inside the planet Mystara. So be sure to join in the fun there. Right now, there's a half-orc fighter, a shadow elf assassin, and a human merchant mage. And they could use your help. So come on by. Discord link down below, GameShopsBasement.com link down below. Just hang out, whatever. Before we get into today's topic, today's Smurtiverse Entertainment product of the day is a novel called The Trouble with Trolls. Now, this novel was written by me, and this was my first actual fantasy story. The books that I had written so far up to that point were superhero-type books, comic book hero-type books. I say superhero type because I want to be careful because, you know, DC and Marvel have the word superhero jointly copyrighted or whatever. So superhero type or superhero inspired books. If you are tired of what DC and Marvel have done to their universes and the characters that you liked and your dad liked before you and stuff like that, or your mom liked before you, if you are just tired of, you know, what's been happening to the superhero type of worlds lately, check out the Smurtiverse. You can find those books at Smurtiverse.com. That's SMERDIVERSE. So The Trouble with Trolls is today's product, though, and that was a fantasy novel written for the Hacktastic role-playing game, which sadly is no more, because it was hacktastic. It was fun. It was put out by Black Pigeon Press, which sadly is no more, which is why Hacktastic is no more. But this was now they did at least one more that I'm aware of. It wasn't written by me, but there was at least one more novel written for their world and published before the company went under. But The Trouble with Trolls, that was my first fantasy book. And people have asked me, hey John, can you get the rights to that book so that so that you can publish it yourself and stuff like that? It is available on Amazon. New copies are available on Amazon. I'm not really sure if they're being printed as new copies or if there's just copies in a warehouse somewhere in the world. Not sure where those copies are coming from. But I did put those books on the website at Smurtiverse.com. Link down below to where you can get them on Amazon. And of course, these days, since the company that put them out went under, it doesn't actually personally support me monetarily if you buy the books, but it does kind of support me as an author. You know, more John Clement books in the world. You know, hey, that's not a bad thing, at least not as far as I'm concerned. So that's our product of the day: is the Trouble with Trolls novel, set in the hacktastic world of Gloomforge. Now, for today's topic, does have to do with gaming again. Gaming isn't the only thing we do around here, but this is something that is near and dear to my heart, as a lot of this gaming stuff is, all this nerd stuff is that we're about here at the original Dragon Talk Radio. The particular topic today, I was listening to yesterday's episode again, and I realized that when I mentioned that here at the original Dragon Talk Radio, we're looking for, I mentioned off this list of big names. I mentioned the Walt Disneys, the Jim Hensons, the Stan Lees, the Steven Spielbergs, the George Lucases. I forgot one there's one that I usually include in that list when I mention that kind of list, I'm talking to people, and I forgot one for yesterday's show, but that's okay because this show is more like about that stuff. I forgot to mention Gary Gygax. So yeah, so we're looking for the George Lucases, the Gary Gygaxes, the Jim Hensons, the Stan Lees, the Walt Disneys, the Steven Spielbergs, and I thought, hey, maybe that was fortuitous because today's episode is about tabletop modding. What is tabletop modding? And what is the Tabletop Modders Association, which is some fun stuff here. So some of you here in Missouri, at least, have met the man that taught me how to DM back in the 80s, Ron Watson, and I've mentioned him on some of my videos here on this channel before we got into this new version of the show and stuff. And so Ron Watson, about a year and a half ago, he made a comparison that really stuck with me. So I probably owe him a nickel for every time I use it. But we were both kind of taking offense at this word that they use to describe gaming, some gaming, and they call it homebrew, as if it was, as if we were like stereotypical Shakespearean witches stirring a cauldron with that famous line, boil, boil, bubble and trouble, or whatever it is, and throwing in, eye of bat and wing of newt, to cast some alchemical spell or some homebrew. And homebrew, a lot of the gamers these days, for Dungeons and Dragons and other games, it's like a slur. Like somehow homebrew is like lesser or something. I don't even call it homebrew. I kind of stole a page from my mentor Ron Watson when he said, really, it's modding. And he thought it was very ironic that in the world of video gaming, modders are celebrated. In the world of video gaming, everybody wants to get the latest mod and they want to try out the new mod. And modders are appreciated for their technical skills and their expertise and the years of their life that went into crafting their, honing their craft of modding games. And so Ron Watson said that DMs and GMs that come up with their own stuff, they're not homebrewing. They're not doing like bootleg moonshine whiskey or whatever. They're modding. They're modding the game. So instead of trying to get somebody to come to your table and say, try my homebrew, it should be try my mod. And I remember there was, about a year ago, some of the listeners to this channel and some of the players at the Game Shop's basement were trying to make a connection between me and another D&D based type YouTube creator. And I'm not naming names because that's not what this is about or anything. I want to make the point about the trends that are out there and stuff. And ultimately I want to tell you about the Tabletop Modders Association and how cool that is. But there were these go-between type, matchmaker type people that, hey, we got to get John to meet this guy. We got to get this guy to meet John. And so they kind of facilitated some online meetings, introduced me to this guy, got me chatting with him. And he was completely, he basically said I'm deluding myself or fooling myself if I think that anything that I write as a private game master could possibly be as good or as something that was published in a store and put on a shelf in a store. And if you guys have been around gaming for any length of time at all, a lot of the stuff that gets published and put on the shelf of a store is crap. And I'm not just digging on WotC, although I love to do that. It doesn't matter. Like any company can put out, a stinky one once in a while. Even a good company, quality varies, and even a company that you love, not everything is golden. So this isn't just about trash and WotC. But just because stuff gets put on a shelf, just because some company published it, doesn't mean it's good. I look at like Threshold Magazine, which is put out by the people at the website Pandius.com, Pandius. They keep the Mystara D&D world alive, and they put out this quarterly magazine that the quality there, just the creativity, just the genius is as good or better than anything that's put on a shelf. And these people just do it for free out of their passion and everything. So And there are lots of fan communities like that where they. So the thing is, a lot of times these corporate people. Now I'm not saying every time, okay, but a lot of times these corporate people are just schmucks. They are absolutely clueless people with no sense of game balance, no sense of and there have been times in the history of like D&D and stuff. I'm not saying they always did this in every year or every decade, but there were times under certain regimes, whether it was TSR or WotC, different. There were some sketchy years with TSR too before WotC, but there were some times when D&D just didn't playtest stuff at all. Like they just threw it out there on the market, just like crapped it out there and hey, buy this stuff, and wasn't really play tested. There is a story, can't get into right now because this video is already going to be long enough by itself, but link below to the story about how I figured out in my early 20s that just because something is published doesn't mean it's good. Sometimes you have to ignore the stuff that's published because it's ruining your game. So there's a link below to, and this was an incident that happened when first edition changed to second edition. But this was where I decided, in my early 20s, and I'm 53 now, but where I realized that the story and the game world and the lore have to trump the rules and the mechanics. They have to. I'm not going to, that's just to summarize it. Links down below as to how that happened in the 90s during the first to second edition days. But, and I can go into definitive examples there and stuff. But the point here for today is that DMs, I consider homebrew to be like a slur or an insult. And so the Tabletop Modders Association. The Tabletop Modders Association is something we're starting in the Game Shop's basement. We're going to be featuring DMs that want to playtest stuff. We're going to be putting games together for people that want to be playtesters, stuff like that. And by God's grace and mercy, I am somehow located in Sedalia, Missouri again, which I graduated here from high school in 1990, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And now I wind up back here again in 2024. And it turns out that Sedalia isn't like nothing. We do have the state fair here. I was driving around with my wife a few months ago when we first got here, relating family history and stuff like that. Oh, look at that Taco Bell. That's where your sister-in-law had a high school job. And just, I haven't lived here for decades, but now I'm back. And my wife noticed, because she's not from here, she said, how come there's so many hotels? How come Sedalia has so many hotels for what a size the town it is? And I said, oh, that's the state fair. Because it's a pretty common statistic that people around here know that like all the hotels and restaurants around here make like a third of their yearly revenue during the 2 weeks of the state fair. That's why there's so many hotels, and there's conferences, and Sedalia tries to use the fairgrounds for everything they possibly can for the whole rest of the year. There's no reason to just use them for 2 weeks. And just last Saturday we went to a rabbit show there. And we've got a website, Rabbit Runner Ministries. If anybody likes rabbits, we're into that. I guess that means I just committed myself to putting link down below, didn't I? Okay, yes, Rabbit Runner Ministries, link down below. And while we were looking for the rabbit show, there was blacksmithing show and stuff like that there at the fairgrounds. And so there are, now I'm not saying we're putting tabletop modding at the fairgrounds. What I'm saying is Sedalia has a lot of conference centers, hotels, venues. We're going to use the fancy word. Sedalia has a lot of venues. So we'll be having the Tabletop Modders Convention. We'll be having Tabletop Modders Conventions in Sedalia. So that's something that we're building up towards. So, yeah, tabletop modding. You may have heard it called homebrew. You're not going to hear me say that word unless I'm teaching about it and explaining like I am right now what that word means to me and why I don't like it and why I don't use it. So unless I'm specifically explaining about the word homebrew, I don't use that word. So the Tabletop Modders Association, we're going to be coming up with a logo. We've got discussion in our Discord. Discord link is down below. I'll probably create a chat room specifically for tabletop modder discussions. Right now, the main chat room is called LFG and Hanging Out, looking for group and hanging out. That's a pretty lively discussion in there most of the time. But the Tabletop Modders Association is for game masters who understand that, they used to say, and by they I mean whoever was in charge of Dungeons and Dragons at the time. Modern WotC doesn't, but they used to say that the rules are guidelines, and that the game master and the individual players at the table, they retool the rules for their table. That was a staple of gaming culture. And when I was doing the Game Shop's basement during the COVID times, which is something I talked about a day or so ago here on this show, and I was doing hundreds and hundreds of people at a time. I would get up in the morning, eat breakfast, run a game, eat lunch, run a game, eat dinner, run a game, go to bed, do the same thing again. And I was DMing for, 4 to 8 people per table, times 3 tables a day. Too tired to do the math right now, but it was a lot of people. And so I have experienced a lot of different mentalities around gaming and what the role-playing game means and everything. And a lot of people have this battle cry, like RAW, R-A-W, rules as written, rules as written, rules as written. And they feel cheated or gypped, or they feel like you're wronging them somehow if you don't run the game raw. Well, you can't run the game raw because all the mechanics break down and it sucks. And there's all sorts of things that can, maybe the rules break down and player characters are just OP, and it just becomes this overpowered masturbatory fantasy about how powerful your character is, but it's not actually a game anymore, or for whatever reason, the rules break down and, so for whatever reason, the rules break down because they don't work. They weren't play tested, or the people that made the rules at the company are doofuses. Oh, but they work for a company and you don't. Which is what this one guy tried to say to me when he tried to say that, even though I have, over 40 years experience with these games and all these different editions and stuff like that. And nothing I write could ever measure up to what somebody published from a company just because it was published from a company. Like, whatever. So it was, it was just kind of a, that mentality that, it's like blasphemy to these people if you don't run the game raw. It's like, it's like, religious fanatics, taking the most fundamental interpretation possible of their particular scripture, whether their scripture is, the Bible, or whether their scripture is the Quran, or whether their scripture is a Hindu text or whatever. But every belief system has, super rigid fundamentalists that are so into the letter of what it says that they miss the spirit of what it says. And so it's just, Tabletop Modders Association is for people who are, who want to game master and want to play their game the way this was originally intended. And the reason I say that is because I was there. I was a kid in the 80s. I was an older kid in the 90s, college kid or whatever. And yes, the books all the people said, I didn't have YouTube channels back then and stuff, but in the articles they wrote, in the interviews they did, they all, in magazines and stuff, because we didn't have internet, we had magazines, but they all said that the game rules are guidelines. A lot of times nowadays they call that rule 0, is that the rules are just guidelines, and what the GM says goes. And there's people, these rules as written, these raw people, they want to get away, no, that's just wrong, you're just bad, and they'll try to come, you're just not good enough to roll rules as written. No, I'm good enough to recognize that those suck, and I'm good enough to actually come up with ones that work. But ones where people can have fun if they're just not, pounding the table screaming raw, 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 and not in a good way, not R-A-H, R-A-W. But, so the Tabletop Modders Association, stay tuned, because more will be coming. I'm kind of putting together a team right now. And if you're interested in, joining, helping out, checking out, want more information on the Tabletop Modders Association, visit us on Discord, link down below. All right, so today we've talked about the Tabletop Modders Association. Tomorrow, we're going to try to get away from a gaming topic because I really want to show that we are more than just gaming, although gaming's a big thing. It's not everything. Oh my gosh, did I just say that? Anyway, I better get out of here before I say something else so weird like that.